Welcome in to the RotoViz Basketball Show. It's myself, Colm Kelly. I'm joined by Kevin Szafraniec. We're going to talk a little bit about elite tight end strategy. Is tight end something that has maybe been overvalued? If we're talking to people overvaluing it, Kevin, we may be two of the number one suspects that are doing that with elite tight end. So we are going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about a recent piece a little bit that Blair Andrews has up on rotoviz.com talking about the elite tight end strategy. And he's also talking about something that I've been kind of championing a little bit this offseason is double elite tight end. But something that when people ask me about zero RB, I often say is that people tend to try it, but do it wrong, or they're not doing it correctly. And his article talks about you're not doing double elite. You're doing double elite tight end wrong. So we're going to touch on that, but we're also going to try and draft a BBM team over on Underdog Fantasy. And we're going to try and do it by avoiding the elite tight end position, just as a kind of strategy piece to see a little bit of a different draft. If anyone's interested in a different draft, I did one with Tom Strachan, a DraftKings draft on Tuesday that's up on the RotoViz podcast feed. And on that one in particular, we went with a hyper fragile draft where we had three running backs in the first four picks. I can't remember off the top of my head if it was three in the first three, but it was a tight end and three running backs to kick things off, which is not usually my style this offseason either in drafts. But we are going to get into it in a minute. But as we kick it off, I guess we have to say happy 4th of July to people like Kevin and all the Americans listening in. It is obviously a big day over there. I believe Kevin's heading to a cookout later today. But how are you feeling today on the 4th of July as we get ready to kick off what should be a fun draft?
I'm feeling great. Off till Monday, so I'm going to be spending my whole entire weekend writing. I got a big piece coming up, so we'll probably share that during the stream. But so I'm probably going to spend a good 12 hours just writing for the site this weekend.
Yeah, you'll be able to find that up on rotoviz.com. We will touch on it throughout the draft, but an article that Kevin did around Trey Benson is now available on RotoViz, went up earlier this week. And that team that he's talking about, I'm quite excited. It is going to be around the Green Bay Packers. So we might even get into that and some of our draft opportunities throughout today's draft. And who knows if we're going with lit tight ends, maybe we're looking at some of those Packers tight ends to add to this roster. But as I mentioned, my strategy this season has been really to try and get two tight ends prior to the top 9 tight ends going off the board. And there's some of those tight ends I'm not actively targeting, but really I'm classing that down as far as Brock Bowers. And the article that Blair did, he talks about it down as far as George Kittle. So maybe we'll use George Kittle as the cutoff point for ourselves in this draft if we have to, and maybe we get a Brock Bowers on the roster. But that is something I'm trying to do from my strategy. So if we avoid tight end completely, it hasn't been a case that I'm trying to draft one elite tight end and then let things rumble on and see how it plays out at the back end. I'm really trying to get two of those top end guys and then, going with some 2 tight end builds, maybe adding a third one if it, something falls into your lap. And I know that's kind of a similar approach that you've been taking, Kevin, as well in your drafts. We've done a couple of drafts together. But how are you feeling when I send a message today with the potential plan of avoiding the elite tight end position? Is that something that you've done in many drafts solo by yourself? Is there any, I guess we'll hold off on the guys that we might target, but is there any names once you get beyond that you're really intrigued by this year at the moment to draft?
We'll say as long as Brock Bowers is open for us to take, we're fine. We'll be okay. He's generally my tight end 1 cutoff. As far as if I don't have Brock Bowers as my tight end 1, I don't think there's been very many drafts where I've kind of gone past that. There are some guys in the middle, late rounds, but I don't feel great about, like we kind of talked about the Packers tight ends, even though, the Tucker Kraft injury does kind of put a damper on that. We don't really know when he's going to come back, but he was one of my favorites earlier in draft season. So as long as Brock Bowers is on the board, we're good. But I figure this is probably the draft where Sam Laporta will fall to pick 60, and we'll just be
We'll do a caveat. If any of these elite guys go around below ADP, we have a free hall pass to go and draft them. But yeah, I think it's something that we should kind of jump into and work through as the draft progresses. But one of the things I did mention to Kevin before the show started is I haven't been drafting a lot of elite quarterbacks, which would make sense because if you're drafting 2 tight ends in the first, let's say 9 rounds, that's going to limit you to the quarterbacks that you're able to take in that range, because where you would take a Trey McBride, for example, that is a very common quarterback kind of range of picks there. So I haven't been drafting in one quarterback formats very much of like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, even CJ Stroud. Looking into all the guys in that range, Lamar Jackson. There's a lot of those that are not there. So what I would like to do is open myself up to get some shares of that, because you don't want to get stuck in your ways throughout the entire draft season. And one thing that, I had Michael Dubner on a couple of weeks back, and we talked about the approach, of barbell in your drafts and trying to strategically play them throughout the course of the summer. But the other part of that is that we are now closing in rapidly on the NFL season. And you can talk about like your strategy, and that you'll adapt it and you'll balance exposures throughout the course of the off season. But what's going to happen is we're going to look up here in 4 weeks' time, and we're like 4 weeks from the start of the NFL season, and we're like, well, it's all double elite all the way for the tight end. So I like to sprinkle in those different builds and see what maybe you are missing when you're not doing those. So are you ready to jump into it, or have you any final thoughts? Have you any final prayers that you want to give to the tight end gods before we start this?
No, I mean, I'll be happy if they do tempt us with just giving us like a 2-round discount on some of these elite guys. That would be that would be ideal. But as far as the elite quarterbacks go, it's kind of nice because every once in a blue moon you'll have Anthony Richardson drop, or we'll have CJ Stroud. I've seen CJ Stroud actually drop around plus semi-regularly, so that might be something that we look into today. But
yeah, we might attack it from that different angle. And the other thing, when we talked on a recent show for RotoViz Overtime that myself and yourself recorded, and this is a surprising one, it isn't released yet. It's in the can at the moment. I think it's going to come out as next Friday's edition of RotoViz OT. But you did talk on that one about Jelani Woods, who's a late tight end that maybe we could look into. So even if we went to an Anthony Richardson team, maybe we get into some Jelani Woods later on. So there's lots of ways to try and play it as we go through. But let's pull up here. We'll jump in to a draft and we'll see what draft slot we get. We'll see how things start to set up. We'll have to let it fill. And I'm looking forward to drafting here. So we're waiting on 10 people. So we have time to talk about our strategy. And anyone who is watching along, if you are jumping in this draft, declare yourselves in the chat. Let us know that you are in there as well. And then we can kind of try and avoid saying things that people might steal off us. So we are ready to go. 9 people remaining. Let us know if you jump in. Always declare yourself. But yeah, is there any of the elite quarterbacks, if we are doing a slightly different approach here to this draft and avoiding the elite tight end, is it a case that we, have you an elite quarterback in that kind of top 5 QB range that you're actively trying to get on the rosters, or are you just kind of seeing how the opening rounds play out, what players maybe you have to potentially stack with them? And then the other part obviously is, does somebody slide past ADP and give you an opportunity that you don't get in every draft?
Well, I can tell you that the one that I have not, I think my lowest own of those elite guys is Jalen Hurts. I don't know. I just don't feel great about him this year, honestly. I did draft him in one of my BBM slows, I think yesterday, because he was around past ADP unstacked. I just thought the value was too good. But, I mean, really those top 5 guys, I guess, sometimes I've been trying to get, I haven't had many Josh Allen Kincaid stacks, so I'm trying to get that to happen, but they never seem to come to fruition. Kincaid always gets sniped from me doing that. But I don't think, like I said, I think I'm at market on both Richardson and Stroud, and all the guys before them, I'm probably at like 4 or 5%.
And part of it as well for me on those elite guys is just the cost of putting those stacks together. So if you're going in and getting the pass catchers to go with them, I tend to like to, kind of almost backdoor stack, like take your players in those first 6 rounds and then see who's available. And, with the players I tend to like, that leads to a lot of, people mightn't like this, but sometimes I don't like it either. But, Derek Carr, Chris Olave, maybe even Kirk Cousins, along with his potential weapons. There's a lot of that kind of going on rather than trying to pair them together. But I have noticed recently, the likes of Joe Burrow is slipping in a lot of drafts and across all sites, for example. And there's some interesting ones. But like if you can get, Amon-Ra St. Brown and then get a little bit of a cheaper price on a Jared Goff, that's kind of the way I'm playing it rather than trying to get, AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts, for example. And then if you aren't the AJ Brown drafter and you pass on Jalen Hurts, it's going to be hard to, make sure you would get him along with Devontae Smith as well. There's a couple of ways that are tricky to play it, but yeah, they're obviously very, very high powered stacks then at that point. We are picking from the we picking from the 5 or the 6 here? I think we're at the 5.
5, yes.
Yeah. So that there's a very interesting spot, and I joke about this a lot. It's kind of a perfect spot for streaming. It gives you a little bit of time to talk between the picks, lets you set things up, and means that you just aren't under as much pressure. So the 5 spot is interesting because you do kind of have a tier where I feel like Christian McCaffrey through Amon-Ra St. Brown is just a little bit of a tier above once you get into the Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, along with those wide receivers. But is there a name there that you're like most comfortable clicking? So Christian McCaffrey goes off the board. We know it's going to be CD Lamb. Any of those? I mentioned Amon-Ra. Have you a preference between like Chase, Jefferson, and Brown? I think that's where the real split happens for me.
Yeah, generally Chase is who I would be targeting here as he goes off the board. So, I mean, I'm be okay with Tyreek or Justin Jefferson. I mean, any of the 3, I'm happy getting any of those guys on.
Yeah, I felt like Hill was never going to get to it. So mine now would be between Jefferson and Amon-Ra. I lean mostly to Jefferson generally, but I'm not against Amon-Ra. Have you a preference there? I'll let you make the click.
I'd go with Jefferson. Just his production. I think his quarterback situation's overblown. I mean, I think I have more faith, I guess, in Kevin O'Connell than anything else. He designs a good passing game, so I'm not super. I don't think obviously anybody's going to be to the level of Kirk Cousins this year, but at the same time, I also do believe in O'Connell's ability to scheme an offense.
I guess part of it as well, as you mentioned Cousins, and I mentioned him earlier in the show, but I've never really been a big believer that the offense is driven by Cousins. It's always been driven by Justin Jefferson. And even with, God, I don't want to get into, Sam Darnold, sorry, but Sam Darnold, is he maybe better than we've seen in New York? I think so, but I don't really see a huge ceiling there from him. But as the offense goes and as the volume's going to go here for Justin Jefferson and then what he does with that volume, I think we're not going to see him at this particular price point in drafts. And I know it's at a high-end price point, but I don't think we're going to continue to see that once people start to see some appropriate quarterback play in that offense. But I'm kind of splitting that just from draft to draft. Jefferson's usually one spot ahead by ADP. So when I can get him, I take him, and then there's more chance if you're drafting, let's say at the 7 or 8, that you see Amon-Ra fall to that spot than a Jefferson. So just trying to balance it out that way. I have leaned all offseason though slightly towards Justin Jefferson. I started an FFPC draft with Tom Strachan, who's in the chat here yesterday, and he probably will admit that I'm probably going to push quarterback a bit more than he would like in that draft. But we started off that particular team with CD Lamb, and this is from the 108. CD Lamb followed up by Amon-Ra. It is super flex, but it's quite an intriguing start. We'll see how it progresses throughout the rest off the draft. But sometimes it's a case of a decision we had to make in that was passing up on Dak Prescott to go with Lamb, and it's a case that you may not be able to build that uniqueness of those 2 wide receivers versus, I think, that other one will be quite common. So it's just trying to see which of those 2 wide receivers will come to you at ADP. We are 3 selections away here. Obviously, tight end is not available to us, unfortunately. But who are you kind of targeting in this range off drafts?
Generally, it's between Ayuk, like right now, Ayuk, Collins, or Waddle. I'd be okay with any of those 3.
Ayuk did go. I have been kind of playing the Deebo Samuel side more recently than the Ayuk side of the 49ers offense, just based on the price and the season on season performance of those 2 guys in terms of how they're used. I think if we could get higher volume going the way of Ayuk would be massive. Again, from these 2 players, I lean towards Waddle. Okay. You have the control, so you can decide. But from those 2 names, Waddle's the one that I generally would be drafting.
Yeah, and if we also want to do any sort of stacking, if we wanted to take a stab at the Houston-Baltimore game, we can always do it later. So I'm 100% okay with taking Waddle there.
Yeah, a little bit of that again. You've kind of hit on it as the cost. So like Stephon Diggs is one of the more key pieces for my builds from the Houston offense when I'm trying to build those out. And like when we're looking at Tyreek Hill and Waddle, love getting Hill on rosters, but getting Waddle a bit more cost effective. And then when we get to quarterback, sometimes I find Tua is easier to get than CJ Stroud. So just trying to build out the rest of the team from this point. But I'm very interested if, Diggs probably goes before it gets back to us again, but I'd be very interested in him if that was the case, that he was available. So it's interesting with some of these offenses, Deebo Samuel and Ayuk going half a round apart. We're probably going to see, within a round and a half, we're going to see the two wide receivers there that I mentioned from Houston go off the board. There's some of these offenses pretty close together. So it'll be interesting to look back at season's end and to see how these all play out and which was the right side, because in terms of the capital we're investing now at this point, there isn't a huge difference in picking your side of which one of those that you do want. As we were getting close there, Devontae Smith did go off the board. He was somebody of a lot of intrigue there. We are one pick away. You have starred Devon Achane along with Malik Neighbors. I did mention Stephon Diggs, who hasn't been starred, but is he somebody of interest to you in this particular format with half-point PPR?
Yes, especially just listening to sharp people. I know Sean is really big on Diggs this year. So it's the humility-based drafting. I wasn't necessarily, he was at ADP, he was the one that I was least interested in Houston. But I mean, I definitely am going to defer to Sean on something like that. So I would be okay with it. We could either build out our Miami stack or go with Diggs.
I would go with Diggs.
Okay.
I do like Achane as well, but I think if we're giving up on the elite tight ends, we want to really have another strong part of I think the wide receivers need to have the real firepower to try and compete with that. So getting Diggs there. The interesting thing, again, I mentioned, him along with Nico Collins going off the board, but Tank Dell's probably going to go off the board here in the next 3 or 4 picks. So it's a really condensed offense, and Diggs has, started to get more buzz in terms of people talking about him, like you mentioned, over the last month or so, and that's going to affect, how things go. I don't think it'll get as high as Collins and Diggs swapping ADPs or anything, but it's not that far away that it could potentially occur. So we'll see how it plays out. When we're getting back here in the 4th and 5th rounds, is there any running backs that you really like around here? Are you looking to, because this is the area now, I think, where you'll start to look into the elite quarterbacks. And for me, there really isn't anyone in these next kind of 2 rounds that I would take a running back over a quarterback. But I also will be, pushing hard to continue on the wide receiver train here as well as we move through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ETN really is the only one coming up when we swing back around that may be interesting. But I'm with you. I'd rather push wide receiver. I say we've had some picks, so quite a few people go before ADP, like DJ Moore and Cooper Kupp both went before the end of the second. So
yeah,
we may see a little bit of fall in value. So I mean, I'm okay with either. We could keep playing the Baltimore-Houston side of things if things work out for us.
Yeah, so we'll see how it plays out. 10 picks away. A lot can happen in a 10-pick range here. Sam Laporta, one of our favorite targets, went at the 308. I think probably in consideration at that Diggs pick if we're not trying to avoid the tight end position. So he's certainly somebody to be watching. But we are going to see, Kelsey, Kincaid, Andrews in these next couple of rounds as well. But when you aren't targeting them, for example, with some of these running backs that we won't be targeting in the next couple of rounds, it's always your hope that those are going to go off the board to allow the wide receiver position or the elite tight ends or the elite quarterback, whatever you're targeting in that zone, to make it to you. Because obviously if people draft players you don't want before your pick, that's quite a positive thing. But when we're not taking those elite tight ends, ideally we would see those go off the board in this range that would allow us then to have a better draft selection when we are at our pick. This has been a very heavy wide receiver draft so far, as you would have expected. But quite the avalanche starting to take place here at the moment. We do have, at this moment in time, 7 running backs off the board. We have Sam Laporta, but every other pick so far has been wide receiver, and that is up until the 401. We get Travis Kelce at the 402. But shaping up to be an interesting draft here as we drive through the next couple of rounds.
And now our choice of not going for elite tight end is really going to make things interesting, because then there goes Flowers. We have the Allen and Hurts, Jackson. I mean, generally after Higgins is off the board. I'm not super interested in a lot of these guys. Maybe
Yeah.
McLaurin if I'm stacking, the Commanders. But I mean, I was happy taking Kirk, and like I think he was around 60 early in draft season, and now at 43, he's not really a click I like to make. I don't know how you feel about Kirk or Amari. I know I know that the show's feelings about Amari Cooper generally.
So we are now 3 picks away. We'll see what plays out. Josh Allen does go off the board. Jalen Hurts probably goes here. We are probably in that situation where we're going to have to potentially scroll down the board and see what happens. But we are, I would say we're into like all the way down to Keenan Allen, which is a round after ADP. Jaden Reed is around that, ahead of ADP. Pacheco goes off the board, and that is leaving Etienne as a potential availability here for us. And I do think by players available at this point of the draft, he is the player that I would draft here. Is there anyone else that you want to pitch for? Is there a quarterback you want to look at?
I mean, I sometimes have been taking McLaurin, like I said, just as a hedge on the Commanders offense. But I mean, Etienne is who I would generally take right here.
Okay, let's do it. Always nice to see when you click into a player and then it gives the news update. And I know it's from a month ago, but like workload to decline with a question mark after it is the latest blurb for Travis Etienne. So we'll see. But I think that's a really powerful start with Etienne, Jefferson, Waddle, and Diggs. And that was like a flat part of the draft. Like, and killer there. I almost did say that we would just completely abandon the show's topic there because Trey McBride went 1 pick after at the 409. I'm happy to draft him in the late third, and that was a hard one to pass up. It took all my will and all my power, but there is a chance that now with this, 5 picks to go ahead of us here before it gets back to us, that maybe McLaurin would still be in play. We might start to go back into the quarterback range, but that's the first pick there that was extremely difficult to pass up on.
Yeah, I say right, basically. Like I said, after Higgins, like I haven't been taking much Pickens. I know that could blow up in our face or in my face. I don't know. I think just he had that one big game that pushed people to the finals, I believe, last year. I can't remember if it was 15 or 16 where he had that big breakout game, but I think maybe people remember that with rose-colored, looking at that scenario through rose-colored glasses versus the rest of the season, which was pretty not awesome.
That's one way to say these things and try and be nice about it. Mark Andrews hasn't gone as of yet. Really, it goes at the start of the 5th round. So right now he goes 1 pick after ADP. Yeah. So Kincaid goes in this range. There's so many players I wish that we could jump into, but one thing I'm interested here, we obviously have nothing to go along with Patrick Mahomes who would be available. But we do have Keenan Allen, who we passed up on that last pick, and Jaden Reed, who is also interesting, that will be probably available here too. As we have 1 pick to go, both of those are available along with Mahomes, Josh Jacobs, Ridley, for example. Haven't been drafting much Ridley. Anthony Richardson is here, but I do feel like Keenan Allen will be a really nice addition to this particular roster. If he does go, Reed would be the next in line. Is there any other names by ADP that you have in the list here that you'd be interested in?
No, those are the two. I mean, unless we really wanted to chance trying to take Mahomes and come back with Worthy, or vice versa, take Worthy and come back with Mahomes. But if we really wanted to kind of branch out, but I'd be happy with either of these two guys. That's how I would ordinarily play this.
Yeah, let's do that. Take Keenan Allen. I'm kind of looking now when with the way quarterback is set up here so far. I'm probably looking, if we don't get something in the next round here, Stroud is still somebody who would potentially be an option. I don't believe he's gone yet. He's usually after Mahomes and Richardson. Yeah. But then you'd be looking like, I'm kind of looking down to Tua beyond that. So kind of pushing it down there, and then we'll start to pick things out. Is that what you're looking at quarterback, or is there somebody here, like if Richardson obviously comes back in the next round, could be interesting. Stroud for me would be the one that would probably the one that I would target here if we had the opportunity.
Yeah, I'd be looking for anybody to fall like around past ADP or almost around. That's when I'd start getting interested in a lot of these quarterbacks. I don't really want to take them at ADP. I'm generally only taking the elite guys when they fall. So, but I'm never opposed to it.
That's kind of the way I would be playing it too. I like to ask for other people's opinions rather than just try and force my idea onto the draft. But that's kind of the way I would be playing it, where I do think that that's where you can build super teams that are quite unique, where you can, if you can play it out and you're not set on having to have certain guys. And that's part of the reason too, when we're doing this, if I'm doing the double elite tight end, we have to try and get Laporta, McBride, or another couple of guys paired in there at the top of the draft. And if I'm not getting two of them, I'm kind of feeling like I'm missing out. And when I say two of them, that's down to Brock Bowers. I feel like I'm missing out a little bit on that build and how things have played out. But when you're then like waiting on quarterback, you will have lots of times where you're like, I wish we hadn't taken a quarterback yet, because this guy has fallen 22 picks past ADP, and because you've done something else, you can't do that as the rest of the draft goes on. So I do think staying open at the position and letting them potentially fall past ADP is the best way to play it. And because you're picking out, you have a Miami receiver, you have a Houston receiver, you even have the Bears receiver, and then obviously you could go all the way down to Minnesota. But it's giving you options as to how to start to build out those stacks later in the draft as well, without investing as heavy in it. You mentioned Worthy. He's still here. He's the next wide receiver by ADP. Roma Dunze would be there. Could open things up a little bit more towards the Chicago side of things. Jordan Addison is there. Could lean towards Minnesota. We do have a couple of options here that could be interesting from that perspective. And CJ Stroud is there as well. So we're 4 picks away. Have you any kind of visions in your mind of what you want to do, as we obviously have to pass up Kyle Pitts and George Kittle here?
I was thinking either Dunze or Addison. I mean, I like Worthy better, but just for the sake of roster building. And I think my lean would be a Dunze, just for the fact that maybe swinging around and grabbing Caleb. I would rather have Caleb Williams as part of a stack as opposed to JJ McCarthy. I mean, I don't think I would pick Darnold on any sort of one QB roster team. So if anything, I would pick McCarthy at the end if we do end up getting Addison. But we're going to get one
just for fun on this. Look, can you pull up the draft board for me and show?
Sure.
Let's see where DJ Moore did go off the board, just in terms of our wraparound here. So DJ Moore
is at 21.
So there is a chance that drafter would take the quarterback. He would have 2 picks before our next pick. So if we do go with a Dunze, we just have to be aware that we could miss out on the quarterback from that perspective as well. Yeah. Jordan Addison did go, though. We are about to be back up on the clock. Worthy also went. So it kind of leaves us with the decision here for me is we'll hold up. You could go with Christian Watson and hope to get Jordan Love, would be a way you could play it. If you wanted to do that, he may come back to us though in the next round as well if we want to go Dunze. The other player I would mention will be Kenneth Walker, but I'll let you make the final call here. Let's take a Dunze.
Let's go to Dunze. I think one of those guys, we'll get somebody come and wrap around in 8 picks. I mean, I'm happy with Walker. I like Walker a lot. If Stroud falls, then we have that conversation. But I mean, I really like this pocket of wide receivers.
I think we have a couple of options here. Let's add Watson in just in case we come back to that decision too.
We gotta have our man in there too.
Yeah, we have to, just for the purposes of the stream. Walker does go, Kittle does go. Hopefully Evan Ingram goes here and lets things continue to move around. But we are open here for a few options. Fortunately, we have 5 picks to go. We have 4 players in the queue. So that's always a fun way people can watch as we sweat along the way here to see what happens. We do have some comments in the chat. We have Tiger Uppercut saying that you can truly fade the elite tight end position or the tight end position and just take too late. Well, that's what we're going to have to probably do here today, which I'm not looking forward to because that's not something that I tend to want to do in these drafts. So we do have a slight difference of opinion and how I'm playing it so far. But hopefully today is the day that we can get that. I think if you're going late, you really need to be taking at least 3, potentially 4, which then can limit some of the other areas of the roster. But one thing that we've done today is like take an ETN that there may free us up on having to, the running back picks that we would normally want to make, and maybe you're adding in that extra running back. Maybe that opens things up for us from that perspective. So we can wait and see. The drafter who we talked about, who did take DJ Moore, is coming up in a moment. They have yet to take a quarterback, so could potentially be a quarterback selection here from the Moore drafter. We're 2 picks away. Jake Ferguson goes, JSN goes. We're going to have a nice option here as to what we do. So we do have CJ Stroud, who would now be 13 picks after ADP. I think that's probably the way to play it. Or do you want to?
I think so as well.
Yeah, I think
he's right in that zone.
Yeah.
And just for reference, we are outside. We are free to take tight ends now. So
Is that what
we
we're
are we
saying?
are there. We're there. I mean, we're past Kittle.
Okay,
Even
take a
Jake
deep
Ferguson
breath.
went. Yeah.
Take a deep
Woo.
breath. So we'll see. Deep breath now. We're open to tight end positions if we're trying to skew it. But that gives us Adunze, Allen, CJ Stroud, and Diggs. But what it may push us to do here now with the two Bears is we should probably add Williams into the queue just to keep our mind ticking over from that as well. He's usually going kind of in the 10th round as quarterback 12, but in between where we have now taken CJ Stroud, there's usually Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott, Jordan Love, Jaden Daniels, and then Caleb Williams. So there's a lot of names to go in between here. His draft ADP is a couple of rounds from here, but just something to keep in mind. But it also now, because we pushed the Stroud pick around, we got a Dunze, it can open up now. I feel like we're pretty set up here if we were to get that it would be a 2 quarterback build then, and you'd be saving your roster spots for, as we talked about, trying to get those additional tight ends late that would balance it out. So I'm feeling pretty positive about how this build is progressing so far. How are you feeling about it?
Good. I wanted to, in the chat, Tiger Hupkett said, look at the tight ends at the 2 spot. And
that's pretty wild. I was trying to figure out, when he said look at the 2 slot tight ends, I thought we were talking about just like where we're lining up on the field, but the drafter in 2 has gone Mark Andrews, George Kittle, Jake Ferguson. So that is also, at least it's Mark Andrews with Lamar Jackson, but they're, talk about bully tight end. They're logging it in. Don't think any of those were auto picks either, but we'll see how it plays out now as we move forward here. But no, I'm very positive, and that is again that thing I mentioned about, like, we could have easily missed out on Stroud there, but when you take Stroud and you push him around the corner like that, it allows you to have a roster now that could be a Stroud team that is an Allen, a Dunze, and then you're getting the quarterback paired with them as well. That's not something you can do if you take Stroud there at ADP, because you can't get a Dunze coming back around the corner probably, and most likely. So building out teams by pushing it. And even when it comes to Dunze and Allen, I don't think we're in a situation that it has to be a Williams team that can open things up there as well. So lots of options here. We also have one running back, which kind of eases that running back pressure to dive into that zone. Are we really, are we saying that we're possibly taking a tight end here, or do we want to truly push the tight end position?
I think we should see how it shakes out, but I would not be opposed to taking one specific tight end.
So what you're saying is if Brock Bowers lasts for 5 more picks, is that where we'll see it play out? Is that the discussion? That's
I do believe
subliminally. His ADP is a couple of picks from here, but I think he makes it there. Do you like?
I do.
Are we kind of cheating the system here if we do that?
I don't think so. I mean,
I don't think so. I think that the people in the chat will agree with this as well. That for me, that is a cutoff point. But I think for drafters in general, I don't think that's a person that they're thinking of as in that grouping. I think that's more so that we're making that group to add him into it. So we're 1 pick away, and he would be available.
There he is.
Do we just cheat the system here? The other players available: Jameson Williams, Brooks. Then we have Swift, Samuel, James Conner. But all those players that are named there, like the one that I'm probably looking at, some of them running backs are really in my eye line here. But I do think that Bowers is the pick after what we've. I think it should be our reward for what we've passed up here.
I do. It was a lot of self-restraint. So, and that let's put it on Blair. We're going by his rules and his article. So.
Yeah,
so he made the outline. We're just following it or going against it, I guess.
Yeah, make sure you check that out up on rotoviz.com. Lots of great information in it about going with the bully tight end build. But look, to get him at that point of the draft, I think is hugely mispriced based on ADP. But to get him in a team that you've pushed it as much as we have, I think that worked out really well. Now, I did mention the running backs and being interested in those. Brooks, Mostert, Connor, they all go in picks after us 3 in a row. Zach Moss went 1 pick before. Jalen Warren, Aaron Jones, Amir White. This is a heavy running back round, and it is kind of the 0 RB range of drafts where, the only wide receivers that have gone the last 2 rounds are JSN, Christian Watson, Cortland Sutton, Keon Coleman, Dobbs, Jameson Williams. So there's a lot that we've seen go off the board at the other positions in this point between the quarterbacks and mainly running backs in those 2 rounds. So I would like to see some of those running backs come back. But with that in mind, DeAndre Swift is sliding here. He's now 10 picks past ADP. He'll be 10 picks past ADP when it gets to us here if we get one more pick. I feel like with that discount as well, he probably has to come into consideration here at this point based on, hoping that some of these other names, I know you've starred Benson, we might talk about him in a moment, Brian Robinson is available here. But I think there's, some chance that they could slide. I don't think they will. But again, when we're talking about ADP, we're taking Swift potentially around after ADP. He does go one pick before, so changes things up. What are you thinking here? You've Pollard in the queue, not somebody I've been drafting much of. What are you feeling as we run down the seconds here?
I mean, I'd like to push quarterback. I know that a lot of them fall. We always have more options deep. I mean, I know Pollard is somebody that a lot of people are not on, but I have been taking him a decent amount. I like his situation, but I'm okay with Benson or Pollard depending on.
Let's go with Pollard. Just it's something I haven't been doing, so just to change things up.
Yeah, I think obviously after last year he got a bad rep. He was just super inefficient. But I think the situation in Tennessee is better than we're expecting. And I wrote up after the signing, I wrote up the Titans backfield. And I mean, I think a super, super underrated aspect of that is Bill Callahan coming in to be the offensive line coach there, and them adding Cushenberry as center and then adding a tackle in the draft. I think that they're going to be way, way better. I think people are pretty much anchoring to 2023 Tennessee and not really looking forward to the future, specifically in the passing game, because I think all the focus is really on Levis and what is he going to do. But I think the running game is really going to surprise people.
There's a huge amount of change there in the entire organization, but both on the playing staff and on the coaching side of things. So the cases that we make for Spears, who I really like, they're the same cases that you could make for Tony Pollard outside of what happened last season. And prior to last season, Pollard, like when he was with the Cowboys, had been consistently one of my favorite guys to kind of draft behind Zeke in those situations. So there is that bounce back potential for things to go in the right direction here for him in 2024. But I have been playing this offense by the lower cost running back, and the one that I like better than Spears. But so that's usually the reason that I would be going in that direction. But at that point of the draft, Swift would have been nice, but when we have Pollard there, that was a very flat zone. I would have been reaching down to Brian Robinson, who we are 9 picks away, but Benson and Robinson are both available still at this particular point. Javonte Williams would come into focus here. There's quite a few people that I would be interested in seeing go back. Williams does go off the board, which I wasn't really anticipating or expecting, which is a little bit disappointing. But again, I don't think it was a necessity to get him, but I'm actually very surprised that he's gone at that point of the draft.
And he goes to the drafter who did not draft DJ Moore, and the drafter that did draft Najee Harris and Jalen Warren back to back in 7 and 8. So got something interesting going on over there at the 11 spot.
Yeah, so we'll see how it plays out, and we can look back on the decision. But that was a place we take Tony Pollard. But in terms of how things generally shake out, I think trying to push, maybe it wasn't the right decision, in hindsight to make that push. But I thought because we had the 2 Bears, that would potentially let him fall down that a little bit. So we get a run here of running backs of Williams, Spears, and Robinson. As things start to turn back around, as there's 5 picks before we pick again. How are you adjusting to the Caleb Williams selection there? Are you, how's that affect? I think we're okay because of how the overall team is turning out. I would have liked that stack, but sometimes these things happen. It's getting worse. So Devin Singletary also went off the board.
And the thing is too, obviously it's ideal to have the quarterback in the stack, but you can still keep pushing those. I mean, the way that I generally play the Bears backfield is through the late guys. So, I mean, it would have been nice to get Swift at a 1-round discount, but at the same time, I have been taking a lot of both Herbert and Roschon. So, I mean, I'd still say, we could still push the Bears regardless. I have no problem with that. And, really getting Stroud at a discount, I consider that elite QB. So even if we don't get a second one in the window, I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah, it's kind of balancing out it's balancing out getting the discount and Stroud with missing out on Williams. Williams now, just to be clear, did just go 2 picks ahead of where his ADP would tend to be, but Dak Prescott went just before that. I did think we would get him around the turn. Usually goes ahead or goes after Brock Purdy or around the range of Brock Purdy, usually Purdy before him or Purdy after him, sorry, but he is still available too. So as he goes off the board, we are now one pick away. Any names standing out here for you at this particular point? I'm probably looking down to Chase Brown, Jerry Jeudy kind of range. Anyone else standing out for you?
I'm personally not on Jeudy as much as some other people at the site, but I still take him every once in a blue moon. I would either be going Chase Brown or Blake Corum, I think, at this point, are the two that I feel like have the best.
Yeah, let's go with Corum. There's a big difference in ADP there. Not a big difference, but in terms of potentially getting two of them.
Okay.
Leave him starred.
I know, say Corum, it's not somebody I'm super on, but I've been more on than I thought I was. So I'm hoping that it's more, and that's more of a belief in McVay, more so than Corum's talent, unfortunately. And I hate doing that, but at the same time, there's just some coaches, McVay, Shanahan, McDaniels, even though I really like the backs in McDaniels' system, but there's just some coaches that, just really know how to design a run game. I don't know if we want to throw Arthur Smith in there, but but I mean, so the Blake Corum play that I've been going with is more to do with McVay, so more so than Blake Corum's talent, unfortunately.
I do think that you want to have pieces of that offense, and I think when you're looking at running like a second running back on a roster who's probably going to get some work anyway and has a chance then if anything was to happen, that guy in front, just you want to have your pieces and be involved in that sort of situation. So sprinkling in Corum, I know a lot of people who are very high on him in that situation. Again, I haven't drafted him a huge amount. Usually Brian would be my click there, but I think again you need to balance out those exposures as you go through this point off the draft. And it does, once those guys are going, get pretty flat. And we did miss out, as we talked about there, on our preferred, I would say, quarterback based on having the two Bears. But the quarterback that I kind of really would have been targeting from those early open rounds that I did mention was Tua, and he's right around ADP. So if there's not a standout option for us when we get to this next pick, I kind of feel like it would be him I would be looking at. Other names that will be available here: Myers, Gus Edwards, Devontae, or Wicks just went off the board. We're back on the clock. I feel like that for me, this is a clear Tua pick, and it's a two quarterback build. Then at that point,
Absolutely.
Happy with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So there's one other guy that. So I don't know if anybody's actually streaming and drafting with us, but I'll just throw it out there anyway. Downs is a guy I've been drafting a ton of.
Okay.
Just looking at a lot of his, I think the biggest knock on him right now is Anthony Richardson, and everybody says Richardson can't throw short, and that's where Downs is going to operate. But even in the games that they did play together, super small sample size, Downs got targeted quite a bit by Richardson, and then a lot of analytics on our site. When I was actually researching the Seahawks passing game article, when I was really looking at JSN, the other name that stood out in the comps that was very similar to JSN was Downs. So he's almost like an arbitrage JSN. I mean, as far as what their sim scores or what their player comparisons after their first year was. And I've also read on some other sites people that have some pretty high grades on him. So I feel like he's flying like pretty far under the radar right now.
So we'll see if he makes it back. We're 10 picks away. He's 4 picks down by ADP, so that's maybe unlikely. But when we look at some of this could be a team that could end up being a little bit tricky to kind of correlate for, week 17, for example. You mentioned earlier the Ravens and the Texans. A little bit trickier from this point forward to find some of those pieces. Maybe a Bateman might become available, but based on the team balance, it could be, we might be looking more at different positions at that particular point, depending on how the draft is going. But looking down through it, we get Justin Jefferson to start off. At least we do have Reed from the Packers, so we have 2 wide receivers going against each other in that one. But it could become a little bit challenging. There's not a huge amount of Browns that I'm actively drafting. I did mention Jerry Jeudy earlier, but the Dolphins have the Browns. But we might come into some things later. The Bears have the Seahawks as well, so a lot of the Seahawks options here, outside of if he gets back to us here, Charbonnet could become an interesting option based on that. Firemouth was a player I was kind of hoping to come back here. We obviously don't. We could have got more Bears. We could have got Cole Kmet as well, Tad, and both of those tight ends going off the board as well as Josh Downs. So we're waiting and seeing what potentially comes back to us. 4 more picks before our selection. Charbonnet next by ADP. Another player I like here in this range is Kendry Miller. I've started to add more Rico Dowdle into those drafts as I've moved forward, with what the Cowboys have, I guess we could say, failed to do over the course of the offseason with Elliott coming back in there. Marshawn Lloyd is in here. Like, there's quite a few running backs in this zone that I really do like. Is it kind of for you here? Is there anyone that's not a running back, I guess, that's standing out? And is there anybody out of those running backs that you really prefer? Lloyd does get drafted at that point.
I mean, usually my preference would be Miller here. I mean, and that does go with a correlation with Bowers. But for the sake of stacking against the Chicago, we could also do Charbonnet. Like, I don't take very much Charbonnet.
Yeah, we could go wild here. I haven't drafted much Nick Chubb. What about taking a huge splash here on Nick Chubb? Charbonnet does go. So and adding him as your Brian. But what are you thinking here? Kendry Miller?
Yeah, I think Miller. Yeah, I am a Cleveland guy.
If Chubb comes back another round, maybe then we think about it. But
I think so too.
You said you are a Cleveland guy?
Yeah, I live about a half-hour drive outside of Cleveland, and I just read
no Browns.
no, I'm not really, but there was something that came out, and like I said, I don't know if it's local or national news, but basically saying that Chubb is superhuman and he had no pain after his workouts, and he's great, and basically making it sound like he's going to come out of the gate, firing on all cylinders, which I don't really believe.
The other thing I'm thinking about, if it would work out and come back to us here, either Chubb Dowdle went, I would say either Chubb or Dowdle, but I would be hoping maybe some other people have concerns about Chubb and he makes it these 5 picks. But what I would be thinking is, like, we're looking here week 17. We're not looking at week 1 for Chubb. And the roster that we've built out so far, we do have 5 running backs. So we have Travis Etienne, Tony Pollard, Blake Corum, Kendry Miller. Yep. Adding in a player that can be, he goes off the board. It could be that late season, hammer. Could have been interesting. But, if I'm building out a complete 0 RB roster, I feel like I need that spot that you're kind of bypassing Chubb in that situation.
Yes.
But in a roster like this, I think it could have worked out. And you're also having 2 quarterbacks where you probably don't necessarily need to go to the third one in this particular roster. I think Jalen Wright makes a lot of sense if he makes it one more pick here. You're after adding him to the queue. Kamami Vidal is there. Jaleel McLaughlin is here. Wide receivers that are here: Mooney, Quentin Johnson, Jermaine Burton. You've also added Luke Musgrave to the queue. How are you feeling here? Obviously, we did wait on tight end. Do you feel what's your preference here? What's the need for this team, do you think, at this particular point?
I mean, Wright and Musgrave both fit with our build. I was really actually hoping that Hockenson fell here, but I would be okay with either of them. Do you have a preference as far as? I mean, I still think we should probably go 6 running backs.
I think Wright fits in with the 2 element of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think in terms of, like, if Musgrave got back, it would be fantastic. I think we're in a strong position at running back here. And I do have, concerns that once you go past Musgrave, it's a little bit trickier again at tight end. I have another kind of tier break at that point. So I feel like if we miss out here on Musgrave, we may even, I think we're into, at this point, even with him, probably a certainty to go to a 3 tight end. But I feel like you could even be getting into a 4 tight end build with where we're at now at tight end once we pass on him there. I guess that's something that I, building out this team and doing this stream, I was aware that might be the case. So we kind of have to push it out here. Have you, just in hindsight now, the picks in, have you a preference? Would you have went with the tight end just due to the fact that we're unlikely to get the tight end back to us?
I mean, there's some interesting guys later. So, I mean, if I had Love, I 100% would have gone with Musgrave right there. But
yeah.
But with having Tua, I mean, those Miami backs are so exciting that I just like that offense overall, and I'm just going to stack it up as much as possible. All 3 of those guys, even Etienne's super expensive, but at the same time, we saw what he could do last year, and he could be the guy that could blow the doors off of any of the playoff weeks. So, I mean, I like the pick of Wright. I wasn't super on him early in the offseason, but as more information started to come out and the landing spot came out, he became one of my favorite guys in this range for sure.
Yeah, I think he's quite interesting, and I do like to get a lot of rookies on the roster where possible. So he's somebody who fits in with this build. Musgrave does go to the team in 10, which I've had a a bad track record in recent streams of hoping that Musgrave is going to get back around the turn, and that has not worked out for me. That particular player is kind of at a point where I'm like, I would like to have him, but it's okay if I don't get him. If we hadn't have got Bowers, for example, I'd really pushed it. But the other thing just to be aware with Bowers is, even though he's like a generational prospect coming in here, kind of an all-time in terms of what he could offer, still could be a situation where the offense does struggle, or he may struggle early on potentially. So that is always something to be factoring in with, when you're looking at snaps. Tucker Kraft, for example, is somebody that we might talk about, but once we passed him, Musgrave and missed out on him there. But he is somebody who's most likely not going to be at 100% for week one. And then that kind of means that you're betting a lot on things working out for Bowers from the very, very start. So that's where it gets challenging here. You did talk about the Seahawks a little bit earlier versus the Bears. Noah Fant probably becomes a tight end option based on that. We talked about Jelani Woods just a couple of times earlier in the show. He obviously becomes an option. So there is some names there. 4 picks away, Vidal is still in line. Jaleel McLaughlin is still available. Both of those players beyond ADP at this point. You get into Ray Davis, Antonio Gibson, after that Chuba Hubbard. I did mention Rashad Bateman earlier. He is somebody who's in this range, but I would kind of be hoping here that we could potentially take one of those running backs and maybe see Bateman slide back around to us. Is that kind of what you're thinking of playing it out here?
I usually go with Walker over Bateman.
Okay.
My train is the train that kind of has left the station on Bateman. I was taking him a little bit early in the season, but more, I think Bateman or Walker gives you just as good of a bet in that Baltimore offense this year. So
I mentioned Colm Strachan earlier in the stream. He's a huge Ravens fan, and I sometimes defer my Ravens thoughts to him. I was on a lot of Walker as well, and Tom has been kind of adding some Bateman comments into some of the drafts we've been doing together, so it gets interesting. But I'm open to doing that as well. But what could happen is depending on how this pick goes, we could be at a pretty flat spot of a draft here for our next pick. So it might be something we do have to consider. We're 1 pick away, and the queue is Vidal and Davis. I think here for me, Vidal is the way I would play it. Do you have a preference for him or Davis?
I like Davis a lot, but I think I don't get as much Vidal as I should, so we can go with him.
And the other thing that we do have to consider here now is we are up to 6 running backs, so I'm probably nearly finished here at running back. We are going to have to build out those tight ends, and we are at 5 wide receivers. Luckily, with the wide receiver position, we do have Troy Franklin coming up here. We'll have Marvin Mims. They're kind of my receivers, along with the Giants receivers in this range. But as we touched on there, we may also be looking at some of those Ravens receivers. I necessarily wouldn't be against taking 2 of them if it was a case that Bateman got back. But any other players that you're kind of looking at here? And based on build, I do think we're probably looking now at this point at 4 tight ends, unless things work out in some spectacular fashion for the next 2 tight ends we get. I think we're 2 quarterbacks. And then how are you? So basically what I'm doing, I think we're adding an extra tight end rather than the 3rd quarterback. And then I think we probably need 2 to 3 more wide receivers.
I mean, I don't know if I've ever done a 4 tight end build this year.
I certainly haven't.
Excuse me. I would want to do. There's enough guys that I think have enough potential that I think we push it. The narrative how this team would succeed is that Brock Bowers comes out of the gate hot. So I would rather stick to 3 tight ends personally.
Let's take. I'm just going to make the decision here. I think Marvin Mims is the pick, unless you have a preference.
No, love Mims.
I would have gone for Mims and Franklin. Franklin with 1 pick ahead. Based on those, I've mentioned this in a lot of streams. I'm usually taking whichever one goes second, and that means I'm getting. It's one. I would say out of all the players that I'm targeting, I probably have the most balance between those 2 guys, because it's a case of I'm not pushing to get the first one. Sometimes you miss out on both of them. Sometimes I've had drafts, with Bo Nix where I end up with both of them. But I find that they're very interesting at their current ADPs. So that is quite nice. So at the moment, we don't have a lot of, cross stacking on that week 17 reference point. But again, I'm quite happy with the roster that we're building out as a complete roster. And we have obviously some of those stacked elements as well. with the only one is it. Do we want to get into some of these? Noah Fant did go off the board. At tight end, Ben Sinnott obviously went off the board as well. Do we want to get into some of these Texans tight ends? Do we want to go to that direction?
I don't know.
Not the most appealing of situations, but,
Yeah, we kind of did back ourselves into a corner, but I think, like I said, the narrative that we got to play with this team is Brock Bowers is going to be.
We got Jonnu Smith now down in Miami. What about that?
That's. I honestly wasn't even thinking about that, but I have been taking a good amount of Jonnu Smith with Tua, so he'd be my priority or my preferred option. And then, like I said, I got my guy Jelani Woods here. I mean, there's still Jatavian Sanders, but I think if everything works out properly, Smith and Woods would probably be the two guys I'd be most excited to get on this team with. Woods, specifically being just a pure upside play. He may be a 0, but he may also go off a few weeks and really give us a few spike weeks.
They're both usually kind of into that at least 16th round. We get 16th round, Jonnu Smith, Jelani Woods then in the 17th. But we are now into the early 16th round. We're 5 picks away. Some interest. Again, we're talking about if you were lining up Seahawks stuff. Geno Smith at this point in time is 15 picks basically beyond ADP. But you mentioned the Bears running backs. Don't know if you want to over leverage the Bears side of things, but we have Herbert as a potential option here. Roshan Johnson will be coming up. How are you looking at these next few picks? We have 3 selections left. We've mentioned that we need at least do you want to go do you think we're going to go with 3 tight ends to finish this off and get ourselves a wide receiver as well?
Yeah, my preference would be probably take Jonnu here, hopefully swing back and get Walker in the next round, and then right at the end grab Woods. I don't know how you feel about that.
I think that works out because that would give us a 2-6-7-3 build, and I think that would work out for the way this team has come together.
Yeah, I know Sean did write something. Oops, just put the wrong guy. Come on. To talk about doing some, just after all the awesome work that Jake Bose has done.
Yeah. About
doing some 6 wide receiver builds, and that makes me a little nervous. But like I said, I'm never going to doubt what Sean says. Yeah. So I haven't gotten to that point yet. I feel like I probably will at some point this off season. But I mean, generally, I want to get at least 7 wide receivers. I haven't gotten that risky, and I'm not somebody who's generally risk averse. It just feels kind of icky to only have 6 wide receivers on a team.
I think when you're having to start the 3 of them every week, it just is something that you want to avoid in case there is injuries. Or let's say, I know we draft a lot of rookies, but on this roster, for example, we have a Dunze, but if a Dunze doesn't hit earlier, if he is locked behind Allen and DJ Moore, obviously there's trying to not leave yourself with a 5 receiver build for the majority of the season is kind of, and then that's before we talk about bye weeks and injuries. Walker does go off the board though, so that leaves us open to which options. Luke McCaffrey's available here, who I've drafted a little bit off recently. Any other names? I think Tolbert is a very interesting name when you get to this deep in the draft. If you're looking at, a lot of people are obviously on Jake Ferguson and looking at what he's doing, but if we're looking at the competition in that offense, there is a path there for potential success and Luke McCaffrey also goes off the board. So we're 4 picks away. Any of the other names there? I joked there. I didn't joke. I use this phrase sometimes about the Giants. You always get the Giants here late. You have Slayton, you have Hyatt. You can get them all. And
generally, Hyatt is who I would go for out of these names. I haven't taken any Tolbert, even though he is starting to get enticing. All the reports coming out that he'll be the number 3 there. Pretty much as far as the guys that are left, Hyatt would be my preference. Or unless we got to go wild further down, and there's Malik Washington as a last round pick. I'm sure he'll be there with our last pick.
Jelani Woods went. I was about to say.
No.
I was about to say to you if you wanted to go Jelani Woods here and then see which wide receivers come back. We could go with our farmer Dolphin. We could go with Gesicki here in this particular spot. That's probably the way I would do it. Is I would probably take Gesicki and see what our options are then at the back end here.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I think he gives spike week potential, and we're just waiting for the one team to use him properly. He got a little bit from in Miami, but then just kind of faded away. So
that was a bit of a hammer blow. But these are the picks sometimes that when it gets to, and that's Jelani Woods is talking about. That is somebody that we'll be talking about on a I believe I said it was going to be next Friday's RotoViz Overtime where I talked to Kevin, but he has a piece up on rotoviz.com talking about him being undervalued heading into this season. Did have a pretty solid rookie season, missed all of last season and is back in the picture obviously this year again. But Gesicki is somebody again when there's huge potential, but it's never been realized with him over the course of his career. But maybe in a situation here, if the Bengals opt to use him, and they have used their tight ends, even with both of those wide receivers that they have obviously been highly talented, and at the time having Tyler Boyd there, they have worked tight ends into the game, and they've had some huge weeks from tight ends over the last couple of years. So Gesicki being there is intriguing. You know, at this point of the draft when you're building out a roster like this, and he's somebody that I have been starting to add in to teams in these formats, but also in, you know, tight end premium as well, where I still think that when we're looking at the names in this range, he's one of them that could take that big jump up. We are 9 picks away. I think it's a wide receiver pick here in this last round. Is there any different direction that you do feel like potentially taking it, or?
Not really. I feel like our running backs are strong. I mean, even though we did go 5 wide receivers early, I'd still just like to. I mean, Hyatt would be my ideal pick just because his deep speed, he could, you know, have a spike week, and that's all you're really looking for. At this point, is just somebody to you know, hit your lineup a few weeks out of the year, and he can do that on minimal targets, and we'll see. I mean, I'm pretty. I don't want to say optimistic about Daniel Jones, but I think he's always been a better deep ball passer than people have given him credit for. I don't quote me on that, but that's something that sticks in my head. So I could be just not remembering data correctly. But early in his career, I do believe he was a good deep ball thrower. So I'm kind of hedging on that, and I should probably go look that up for, you know, the fact that
we'll
I'm
have that for next week.
Yeah, we'll have it for next week. Yeah.
Stay tuned. But no, we are. And the other thing here, there's a couple of, so we had back-to-back picks of Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. That's the 17-12. That's actually the drafter of that spot took the two of them. Again, not something that I'm looking to do, but you obviously, if you're getting them at that late point, he's gone Drake May, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. I believe he did have a quarterback earlier in the draft. If you can scroll up, Kevin, that is a Burrow team. So I don't really think you need to go with 4 quarterbacks. You just take your shot there on which of those Steelers you want to go with, and that's what I would be trying to do there. But I guess they might be thinking a pick at that point. I would be skipping the Drake May pick if I was planning to take those 2 quarterbacks. But the other part with that is maybe he doesn't expect them all to make it true. So Hyatt goes. So that means I'm going to make a pitch here for Tolbert. The Daniel Jones stack with the last 3 picks, so he gets Slayton in there. We get Hyatt in there along with Daniel Jones. I'm not against the Malik Washington pick as a prospect. I really like him. I've drafted a lot of dynasty of him this year, but I do feel like it's a kind of, you know, next season and beyond, I think we'll see him worked in. I guess the other part of that is with that offense, there is the potential for him to have those spike weeks if you want to. You know, do you want to make a case for it? I think that the Tolbert one is intriguing me.
I think Tolbert's the better pick just overall.
Let's do it. So we are on that final pick. We do miss out, but it shows you the point I was making. Sorry, is can you go back to the quarterback tab for a second? Just I believe Bo Nix, Bryce Young, Gardner Minshew, Sam Darnold, they're all still available here. So I mentioned about the, you know, if you're not taking those elite quarterbacks, I do find that you can, you know, go in with Marvin Mims late in the draft, you know, the kind of a rescue stack if you want to do it. Daniel Jones is the one that's after being done in this draft with his 2 receivers there. I feel like that's something that you can work out quite well at the end of draft. So we took Marvin Mims, for example, in the 15th. But at this point of the draft, there's a chance that Bo Nix goes undrafted, which, you know, you could be adding him in here. And if you're flipping out which player, you know, that you take that elite quarterback, which other options were available at that point, some of the cost of getting some of these quarterbacks at this late is, you know, very, very appealing for me in these situations. If you can get somebody, if you're building a 3 quarterback build and you can get somebody, you know, from the 11th, 12th round and then 2 of these later guys, I think that can work out. The problem is the later guys that I'm interested in are, you know, there's few and far between. It's probably Daniel Jones, Derek Carr, and then even JJ McCarthy. I'm not overly drafting. I have taken some Bryce Young as well along the way. But let's have a look to see our final roster here and see how things have finished up for us. I think we have an interesting build. The one part of it that I would say that we haven't really done is there's not a huge amount of cross week 17 action on this particular team, but it's a 2-6-7-3 build. We have CJ Stroud, we have Tua at quarterback, we have Etienne, Pollard, Corum, Miller, Jalen Wright, Vidal at running back. So a very young running back room, and again, that'll concern some people if they see the stream that aren't used to watching some of our RotoViz content. It will be a lot of younger players that are mixed in there, so a lot of players that this is my theme of the offseason too. People saying that the player hasn't done it yet. They haven't done it yet, but when they do it, they will not be this easy to assemble on a roster. Then at wide receiver, it's Jefferson, Waddle, Diggs, Allen, Adunze, Mims, and Tolbert, which I think is a very strong room that's built out. We do have 3 week 17 buys, but our buys are then spread very evenly. We have 2 week 6 buys at receivers, so we're without Jefferson and Waddle that week, but 2 week 14s, 3 week 7s, 2 week 6. So it's balanced pretty much across the board. Week 6 is a little bit of a challenging one. That's where the Dolphins players are also all off, so we'll be missing Johnny Smith and Tua that week as well. But I think it's a pretty fun team, and based on having pushed tight end as much as we have, I think there's still upside with that tight end group, but obviously we are relying on our boy, our tight end, our
not elite tight end,
our non-elite elite tight end, Brock Bowers. How are you feeling about this roster? And if you can shoot up the draft board, we might talk about some of the picks that we kind of did skip rather than some of those 2v2 situations. But how are you feeling about the draft overall and passing on those top guys?
I like it. I mean, obviously correlations and stacking is something that we love to do, but at the same time, I don't always want to overextend to make those stacks. It's generally more of a tiebreaker more than, it's like, let's build the best team. And if we have a tiebreaker between two picks, or if we're, maybe grabbing a guy that we don't ordinarily grab to get exposure to somebody new, like that's when the stacking and correlation really comes into play. But I mean, overall, I like it. As far as, I've done a lot. If we maybe switched out, well, there wouldn't really be anybody that would be worth switching out with ETN to go 6 wide receivers right off the rip.
The only one there, if we didn't take ETN, I probably would have went for Zay Flowers at that point. He would be the next, like when we're there at ETN, it would be, he went before, sorry.
Yeah.
Ignore me. I wasn't able to time travel back and take him off. So yeah, there's nobody really there. It would have been down to the Keenan Allen pick, who we then got in the next round.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, I'm not opposed to McLaurin just strictly as a bet with Daniels. Like if I would have grabbed McLaurin there, it would have been 100%. Like I'm willing to jump a half round to grab McDaniels when he was coming, or sorry, Daniels when he comes up. But beyond that, I don't think we could have played it. I mean, obviously we probably would have taken Trey McBride if we didn't have our little theme going. But beyond that, I mean, I'm pretty happy with the way that it shook out.
Yeah, I think it would definitely be a Trey McBride roster if we didn't take ETN there. The other part of that is we took Adunze with Keenan Allen. Maybe we do the balance that we talked about at that point was him versus Worthy, and I draft Worthy over Adunze. But we were kind of thinking at that point that it could be Caleb Williams' team, but he didn't manage to make it back to us when we were making that selection. So based on the theory of stacking the roster, we could have went in a different direction and just went with Allen on his own there. Just if you scroll up, is there any names that went after that outside of Worthy that we like? Addison, sorry, and I'm wrong again. I need to learn to read left to right and right to left. Worthy went 1 pick before Addison, went 1 pick before that. So Deontay Johnson was the player. Then you'll be looking down to Jackson Smith and Jigba. So again, we could have went that way, but and the JSN pick in hindsight might have worked out as a cross stack on that game. But I still think overall good player selection, but in hindsight maybe would have went for one bear only. The CJ Stroud pick obviously was a pick that we talked about doing there, and we pushed him around the turn. We did get him back. Then we got Brock Bowers in the next round. Through that point of the draft, obviously we're hoping to get that bear stack, but everything was pretty much plain sailing to that point. When we went then with the Tony Pollard selection, that was where Williams then went about 7 picks after that. We did have a running back run then of Javonte Williams, Tajay Spears, Brian Robinson, Devin Singletary, Trey Benson, who all would have potentially been options for us at that next pick where we take Blake Corum. In hindsight there, without knowing we were going to go on to get Tua after that, would you have rather taken Williams there over Pollard? How would you still play it the same way?
Yeah, I honestly feel like Tua, I mean, just for the fact that we had the two receivers, maybe, because Pollard, I mean, he's not super exciting, but I know that Williams has some athleticism, but I feel like Tua offers just as much upside, honestly, as Caleb Williams. I don't feel like there's a huge difference. Like, we've seen Tua, like, do it before. We know what we're getting out of him. The range of outcomes for Williams is there's a lot larger range for that. So
I find it a little unusual that, Dak Prescott had a really strong season last year and a really strong end to the season. But I do find it a little bit strange that like him and Williams are basically going 2 rounds ahead of Tua, and Tua then has 2 wide receivers going in the first couple of rounds. Like I think that there's a little bit, when I'm looking at the quarterbacks, I feel like he's somebody who should be in at least the next tier above that rather than where he is currently going. And that's again another reason why I'm finding it hard sometimes to go in for the guys in those first 6 or 7 rounds when you're able to get a Tua in the 11th round or a Jared Goff. And Jared Goff has his home road splits, and there's issues with Tua as well. But I just think the weeks that you're going to get from them can be massive as well. We did miss out on all those running backs, which was tough. So in hindsight, like that's one of the ones that I think could play out and be balanced at the end of the season. Because if we take Williams there, we don't take Tua, then we also then we'll see how it works out with Jonnu Smith, but we wouldn't, probably have that. We obviously wouldn't have that stack in. It would be a 2 quarterback build without Tua in the roster. So you'd be looking at it's either Pollard or Williams versus Tua and the players that we would have taken in that particular range. And after he goes, it's Elliott, Schultz, Herbert, Myers, Edwards, Josh Downs, who you had mentioned, Firemouth, Ford. Every player that goes after that, Marshawn Lloyd, it's probably Marshawn Lloyd out of those players that I'm looking to take at that point. So it's basically Tua and Pollard or Williams and Marshawn Lloyd. And I think that's a pretty close toss-up at the end of the season based on how we'll know how it plays out, but it's probably pretty close.
We're going to find out. And the only thing, too, I do have a ton of Chase Brown, more so than Corum, but I probably would have swapped these 2 picks here. When we took Corum, I think Chase Brown obviously probably would have been a better pick, but we'll see. I mean, I feel like they both have a good amount of upside.
I kind of felt like Brown had a chance based on the ADP that he would have potentially made it back around. He went 2 picks after, so that didn't come to fruition in any way, shape, or form. But that also meant then that Tua made it back to us. So you can only pick at it so much. I don't feel like there's a huge amount of we would definitely change this or definitely change that. I think overall it's worked out. It's worked out pretty well. Out of interest, let's have a look at Team 2. They were the team that we mentioned earlier with the 3 tight ends. I think they finished off with 3. They didn't go beyond that.
There you go.
We'll see how we get a look at that one. So Team 3 is a 3 tight end build. So it's a 2-6-7-3.
That was Team 2.
No, I think it was Team 2 that made it was Team 2. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's Lamar Jackson, Bryce Young. They took Young in that last round. Williams, Connor, Dowdle, Chubb. They stole that Nick Chubb pick on us. They have Chuba Hubbard. They have Dante Foreman mixed in.
So double Browns.
Yeah, double Browns running back. They're trying to cover the options in case Chubb isn't back, I guess. We get CeeDee Lamb, Cooper Kupp, Curtis Samuel, Mike Williams, Gabe Davis, Bateman, Walker. So they
got our Walker.
Yeah, they stole him as well. And then at tight end, Mark Andrews, George Kittle, Jake Ferguson. So they do have quite a bit of that Baltimore offense mixed in there as well, which could be very nice to have roster ship off as the season progresses, along with a CeeDee Lamb, Cooper Kupp roster. So it is pretty interesting. The one thing I was interested is when they got the 3rd one, obviously you cannot take any more at that particular point. Yeah. I think I would have went with 2 and left the Jake Ferguson pick out, but that's they have Jake Ferguson along with Lamb as well on that roster. So it is an interesting squad overall, and I think they've done a few interesting things to build it out.
Absolutely.
So yeah, sometimes when something pops up, you think like this is it's over, but at the same time they balanced it out. I think they've done a pretty solid job overall. that is our team. You mentioned earlier the Packers article that may be coming out later this week. So when people are listening to this, it may be even, you know, in the hopper ready to pop up on rotoviz.com. Do you want to give us any more insights into that, or are you keeping it close to the vest at this point?
Well, I'm still pulling data, so I don't really have much to say about it right now. I'm interested because it's just really just a very crowded situation, and just kind of really, I've had a hard time, not a hard time. I've taken all of them, but I kind of want to start concentrating my exposures in that Green Bay passing offense to probably like 2 or 3 specific players. And Kraft was the one I was taking a ton because I don't really feel like there's much difference between him and Musgrave. So, but now with the whole pectoral thing, I don't really know if you've heard anything about, you know, timetables, but I have not. I've heard indefinitely.
It feels like it's going to be like, you know, he'll be back training before week 1, but whether that means like then he goes on the pup or whether he's active or whether he's limited, that's the part where it's pretty cloudy. I don't think we're going to see him being a full go for week 1, for example. So I think that opens up the opportunity for Musgrave to get a little bit of a foothold in that offense as well. The other thing, like, this is as a Packers fan, just like non-fantasy football, that is part of like the organization over the last couple of years has really built out quite a depth at the skill position players. And there obviously you mightn't have one that's a Devontae Adams, but you have basically, you know, 3 or 4 that can fill in certain roles and do certain things in the offenses, which is very good for the on-field NFL stuff. But there is part of me that feels like it could be a little bit frustrating for fantasy managers where it's like, you know, at the running back, at the tight end, at the receiving positions, that it's like, you know, over the course of the season, each of those guys has 4 weeks that are very good, but it's spread around over the season, which could be very frustrating. The other part is if one of them becomes the dominant force in that offense, there's huge upside, but there's just a lot of people to try and dissect. So I'm looking forward to reading the article as well. But no, this was a fun process, fun experience. And we also, I don't know, I'm going to say we tricked the system. We got Brock Bowers, so it's still an elite tight end roster. But that is going to do it for this show. Thanks very much to Kevin for jumping on with me and doing this stream. If you're signing up over at rotoviz.com, you can use the promo code RVRadio2024 at checkout to get yourself a 10% discount off a RotoViz NFL Pass. Gives you access to all of the content and tools up on rotoviz.com. Lots more content coming your way up on the channel here on RotoViz, but also on the RotoViz podcast channel as well in terms of audio side of things. All the audio, apart from the streams, tends to go up a day or 2 ahead off the stuff that you watch on video on YouTube. So if you're interested in jumping in and getting those shows a little bit earlier, Google the RotoViz shows that you listen to, whether that's Overtime, whether that's Stealing Bananas, subscribe to them and get them all once they are available. But they will be up here on the YouTube channel if you want to subscribe there and get them that way, if that is your preference. Do leave a like on this video. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Give us a thumbs up. And until we are back, have a good one.